Hello, everyone. I'm Frank DiLiberto. I'm here with Christopher Neville, professor at Upstate University, and Marcey Keefer Hutchison from Oregon State University, two of our leaders in developing the Foot and Ankle Fellowship for Specialty Practice. The point of this video is to just let membership know about all of the work that's went into the development of the fellowship proposal and where we see it fitting in physical therapy practice. So without further ado, I have a couple questions to throw out and we'll get right into it. So the first topic I'd like to cover is just having you speak to the impetus of and the conceptualization of the fellowship practice, why and how it started, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And maybe I'll tackle the first one here. And that so this actually takes me way back, but I would say I think it was around 2009, 2010, we were tasked with developing entry-level curriculum for foot and ankle care. This was sort of right at the beginning of my time in terms of getting involved with FASIG, and the president at the time in AOPT, I think there was there was efforts to develop entry-level curriculum, and we thought that having some foot and ankle guidance for an area that frequently comes kind of at the end of curriculums, or for many people their experience even in like an anatomy class where the foot kind of gets left to the end and is done quickly. So we gathered a group. I think there was about 15 of us that gathered in Alexandria, Virginia, at the APTA headquarters back in 2010 to really outline entry-level care. And so, yes, very different than our topic of advanced fellowship, but I would say that's where it started. We really, in developing entry-level care, I think the conversation kind of continuously evolved to, well, okay, if this is entry level, well, what's advanced practice look like? What is, and again, that was sort of the infancy of was early on in sort of really common to have residencies and certainly fellowships at that time. But I think the clinicians and experts we had involved in that really saw a future where having an advanced practice kind of outline also would be helpful. So I'll come back around to, I think almost 10 years later, at least, that then we got back to the idea of, okay, let's develop a fellowship. And 10 years later, there was actually a lot of room for that. We had really clear guidance from the ABTRI. So what is it? The American Board of Physical Therapy Residency. I'm going to mess that up, but is that right? Residency Training Education, maybe? Did I get it? But that organization really, being a great, resource and leader in developing advanced practice, residencies and fellowships. And so they really had a really clear path for how we could develop a fellowship. And, we again, we're able to bring together a task force that I think shared, that vision of what could it look like and what would be the needs? Is there a need, and what would it look like to have advanced practice clinicians focused on an area like foot and ankle? We certainly have, dedicated, I think, clinicians and researchers in the field that really focus in that area. We share colleagues on the surgical and medical side that certainly are focused with, for example, the orthopedic foot and ankle fellowship trained surgeons that are focused in foot and ankle. And so to have sort of some mirror parallels on the physical therapy side made a lot of sense, I think. So that's that was the background and how we got going. Did I answer that fully? There was other pieces to this, but maybe I'll pass it along and then interject some more pieces.
No, I think getting the historical perspective's great, right? So, it began with entry level and it evolved maybe organically over time into trying to define a fellowship practice. And so, looking at the ABTRI criteria, could you maybe comment on what steps have been taken to date? Kind of the energy and the mechanics of what happened, and where we are now, I guess.
Sure, I can speak to that, Frank. So once we got to the point of saying, let's do this, let's go for a fellowship, Abtree is very clear on the criteria that you have to meet, and it's a long process that takes at least a couple of years. And so, and we had a pandemic sort of sandwiched into the middle of that, which has expanded the time frame for us. But where we started was by creating the task force, and we have about, I think, 20 some people on the task force. So just coming together and talking with content experts about their experience in foot and ankle, and just seeing, is there any interest in this beyond a small group of people? And so that prompted our first email out to find out what is the interest in foot and ankle fellowship. And there was a huge positive response for that. So then we circle back together, we being kind of a core group of people, myself, Chris Neville, Ed Mulligan, and then Chris Porter. And so we've been working through the process that Abtree set out before us. And so one of the first steps with that was sending out a pilot survey. So a description of what foot and ankle practice actually looks like and how that's different than other areas of practice and where areas overlap. And so once we had a clear understanding of some of those very granular things about what is it that a foot and ankle specialist does, then we sent out our major survey to over 10,000 people and then collected their answers and their input. And so from that really formed the description of fellowship practice. And with that, then we had to answer some other questions that Abtree has for us about what is the need for this? Who do you expect to host a fellowship? So many other questions were answered in that. And that aggregate technical report, along with a description of fellowship practice, was a 63-page document that was submitted to Abtree in October. And so they have 90 days to basically look at our document and then suggest other corrections or implement other things that we might need to make it a better document to go forward. So now we're at the stage of kind of back and forth with Abtree.
Maybe if I could just interject too, but just add on to say, I think those early stages with the task force, and then Marcey mentioned, Ed Mulligan, Chris Porter, really vital. So the task force, I think, had key times, throughout the process when you really need that feedback, really part of the accreditation process, part of Abtree's process. So really critical to have that group, and tremendous amount of work and timely work that I think was really key. And then I don't think we can say enough about, Ed Mulligan was our again, required by Abtree, a consultant. He had done some of this work before. He had done a fellowship, previously. And so, amazing insight that he shared. And then, Chris Porter, he's with the Jackson Clinics out of the DC area. I would say, what's amazing about that group is it was they provided a great avenue for us to see in its sort of infancy stage what advanced practice could kind of look like. It gave their clinicians at the Jackson Clinics, fairly large network of clinics, how their therapists were advancing their careers, moving forward into specializing in different areas. They have some fellowships within their program already, I believe, in shoulder. And so, could they have a lower extremity fellowship, a foot and ankle fellowship? What would that look like? It made it really tangible. And I think Chris was able to speak to that. And that was a huge help as well.
Yeah, just looking at the surveys that went out, the pilot and then the final one, just generating those surveys or organizing all those ideas. It had to be just a considerable amount of work and discussion and thought across, what types of content, what type of systems need to be evaluated, and at what level, and how common they are, right? And so it really is quite a thoughtful, from my perspective, it was really quite a thoughtful approach to tackling a really complex idea of describing what we all want this to look like, or what we think it needs to be. And both of you guys, because nobody's complimenting you here, it really drove this forward. So So
Well, I was gonna
that
say, as you said that, I think Marcey was the master of the Excel pivot table, and at one point there was a lot of survey results that, thanks to Marcey, got organized.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to Nicole at the Academy too, because she was the Survey Monkey guru who took multiple pivot tables and so many rows and rows and rows and columns of data and actually turned it into a form that could be presentable to the public for their response. So Nicole was amazing at her craft with Survey Monkey.
That's great. And so besides, going back and forth with AppTree to address any particulars, are there any other kind of, forthcoming big benchmarks of success? Or like kind of
we're still, waiting on the results. So final documents are in. It's really sitting with AppTree right now for approval. I mean, fully anticipate a little bit of feedback from them, some revisions in, the description of fellowship practice, the DFP. So we submit that as kind of a description of what it can look like. And then, I'll let Marcey jump in here, but I see, next steps after, revision approval. I think those are forthcoming. And then it's really about developing curriculum. And that's really another step, but it's a partnership, right? It's about clinics, and I mentioned before, I think the Jackson clinics and Chris, and then others that we have, other relationships I think we've developed throughout this process. We see other centers across the country with strong foot and ankle programs or interested in growing those, that'll get on board with, okay, what would the curriculum look like? How could we put it in place here? Certainly it's not something that has to, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of fellowships out there. Those curriculum exist for other content areas. And so, really with the fellowship in place and approved with the DFP done, then it's about just putting it into practice, which is really, hopefully the fun part. Not that it wasn't fun so far, but.
Now, I agree with Chris. This is will be the icing on the cake is to get approval and then implementation, which would be just the next step, I think, for the public to be able to move forward with knowledge.
And so then that brings us nicely to the last question, really, right? Where do you see, or how do you see this fitting into the profession and what kind of value it brings to patients? If you could just speak about maybe what the vision is, or what, after implementation, what does this offer or bring?
I'll just speak to a few things. I think that just to improve the depth and breadth of knowledge related to the foot would be able to speak to so many different groups, runners, dancers, and then also pathologic conditions like diabetic neuropathy and things like that. So I think that there should be just a huge area that we could reach. And I kind of think of it like the hand. The hand is just such a complex area and it's so integral to our daily function. And I really see the foot as being very, very much the same type of thing. So I think that the area is just ripe. And I think it's also critical to have fellowship opportunities for people who may not be going a PhD route to deepen their understanding of any content, that having a fellowship experience or available is going to be a very important thing.
Yeah, I'll just add a few things that we mentioned, I think before, but just to sort of circle back to is, I think, some of us have been really involved in some other organizations. Marcey sort of mentioned the hand, and there's some similar organizations for the foot. We've actually partnered with them in thinking about how to, even how to organize some of these. So the AOFAS is the American Orthopedic Foot and Ankle Society, really a dedicated group of foot and ankle surgeons that are all specialized. FASIG really is sort of the PT equivalent right now, and we've worked together for a long, long time. I think the fellowship just provides a perfect pathway for that relationship to continue, the partnership to continue. I think fellows on both sides visiting each other's annual meetings, continuing education, webinars, all sorts of stuff that we're sort of dabbling with now. We certainly have a group that does a little bit of that, but I think the fellowship provides a great opportunity to just formalize that with people that we know are already interested on both sides, but will have then, you know, the training and the pathways to do that. So I think that's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I hope I see a number of avenues, you know, just like you've mentioned. I think it might provide opportunities for a higher level foot and ankle, you know, in clinic research, and even helping out, you know, with entry level education on some level, right? So
Yeah,
that's
Frank, not to jump in again, but
yeah.
you remind me. I mean, we're all educators, right? I think we see lots of students every year, and you know, it is interesting. You know, so many students with a keen interest in, you know, sometimes it is like, is it knee, is it shoulder, whatever, hand, but there's certainly the foot and ankle ones, and you know, I love the opportunity that okay, they get to spend some time in a lab that's focused on foot and ankle research, perhaps, but really to provide, you know, what is their opportunities in the clinic. And, you know, I think they exist, but it's really about finding them. And then, you know, we tell our students, well, hey, you should get involved with FASEG, and that's great. But this is even another step in that direction. I think, you know, the residency pathway is certainly becoming more and more popular. And, you know, this can be even a further step to really provide that focused kind of expertise. And again, the applications, I think, across athletics, you know, performing arts, and then just specialty orthopedic practice. And that even leaves out, this was actually one of the challenges of the foot and ankle specialty is how do we address kids, right? Pediatric foot deformities are really common. Older adults, a whole nother one. Neuro, diabetic. I mean, there's really lots of application that I think, you know, we need expertise. You know, we need experts to be in.
Okay. That sounds like a pretty good closing thought to me. So thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Chris. And thanks for listening, everyone.